My guest today is Officer Tumlinson. He's with the San Angelo Police Department, and you are a canine handler.
I am.
Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you also for your service and for protecting the community. What inspired you to be an officer and then specifically a canine handler?
So I actually started out wanting to go to the fire department. It's kind of an interesting story in that I put in 2 applications at the same time and just waited to see who called me back first. Just so happened the police department called me back first and I got an interview. Started in through the application process and got hired on. From there, in October of 2013, I started the academy.
So you almost were with a Dalmatian, but they beat you to the race.
Instead, it's a Malinois.
That's awesome, though. Can you tell us a little bit about the training that was involved in that?
So to begin with, you have to be an officer first.
Okay.
And so you go through the several-month training process to become a police officer. And then you go through the in-field training to actually take that book knowledge and turn it into knowledge out on the street. After a 1-year probationary period, if you have an interest in working with the Canine Division, you can start training with them on your off time or during shift whenever staffing and calls providing, you can go out and train with them. But you can't take bites until you're off probation. And that kind of plays into the training part of it, in that once there's an opening with the Canine Division, which is not very often because we only have 4 handlers, you go through the application process for that individual division. And it's just like any other specialized division within the police department. There's an application process, and then there's an oral board where you sit in front of several people, some within the division, some with the city, some just officers within the department, and you get asked questions about why you want to be in that division. Prior to my application with the Canine unit, I spent about 2 years training with them, getting ready to be on the division, working with the dogs, helping with narcotics detection, hides, helping with bite work and tracking. And then once an opening came up with the division, I put in my application. Going forward from there, once you are accepted into the division, there's 2 different mechanisms by which you can get a dog. Either you're taking over a dog from somebody else, so somebody is promoted out of the unit or just left the unit to go somewhere else, or you are entering into the unit when somebody is retiring a dog and moving out of the division, and at that time you would go select a new dog. It depends on what that circumstance is, on whether or not it's an already trained dog that you're taking over from somebody, or a new dog, for how long the training process is. If it's a dog that you're taking over for somebody, you can roll right into kind of the situation that I had, in that we just did a in-town training for me. It took a couple of weeks, but I didn't have to go out of town. That was Canine Vader that I took over when Sergeant Chimino promoted to Lieutenant Chimino. And I ran Vader for about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And he just retired as of March of this year.
So the dogs, like Vader, does he stay with you in your housing?
Yeah, so as they're both working and retired, we'll go into retirement here in a minute, but when they're working, they do live with the handler.
Okay.
So it's a little bit better bond than if they were in a kennel somewhere else, like at the department or off-site. The dog lives with the handler, and we have kennels for them, or the dog can live inside, depends on the home situation.
That's got to be tough if you have to retire that dog then, because I imagine you build quite a bond then, and you were with Vader for 6 years?
So I was with Vader for 6 years, and then I elected to keep Vader after retirement. It's at the discretion of the department and the chief of police. Historically, each handler has been able to decide whether or not they want to keep the canine, and we don't, to my knowledge, we haven't had anybody that said, no, I don't want to keep the canine after their service life.
You said that you would make that choice to go canine after all your schooling, your original schooling. So what was your motivation to do that? Did you have a love of dogs, or was it the work itself with the dog?
So a couple of different aspects. One, I grew up having dogs, And two, when I got out on patrol and started seeing how the canines worked and how the handlers worked in conjunction with patrol and other divisions within the department, that's something I really wanted to do. Because canine is at the forefront of most things. So most of the high priority calls for service, such as robberies and violent domestics, things of that nature, we're going to be at the forefront of that when it
You
comes
guys
to
are like the Marines of the police department,
kind
right?
of
You guys
sort
are
of,
in
yeah.
first.
Yeah. There's a saying, canine leads the way.
Right.
And it's because we're at that tip of the spear whenever it comes towards finding people that have fled a scene. We'll use the dogs at sometimes to track and apprehend.
The dog's training, I know you said Vader obviously was already trained because he was handed down. What is their process like? Say you had a green dog or a dog that just came in, didn't have any training. I imagine that process is going to be a lot different than the process of
is.
taking on
It is
a
for sure.
retired.
The process for Vader was pretty simple. I say simple. There's still a learning curve between
You
dog
and
and
him.
handler. So you have to figure out what the dog's commands are and how he works, and then we have to on and become a team and actually work as a cohesive unit. But he knew what to do. So at that point, I was the dumb end of the leash.
So he was
Yeah.
teaching you basically.
Absolutely. Now, once I retired Vader, I went and selected a new dog, and now I have Canine Murphy. And so when we went down to Pacesetter Canine is the vendor that we used, and we selected him out of a group of dogs. Then I went down there for a 4-week handler school. And that was similar to what we did here in San Angelo for Vader, but it was for getting Murphy spun up and ready to be a patrol dog. And so when we go down there, they were considered a finished dog. So he knew he was imprinted on odors, and he was also given basic bite work and tracking. It's kind of like a cadet straight out of the academy. They have
Right.
the book knowledge, but they don't
Don't have
have
the
any
hands-on
street
yet.
knowledge and have no idea how to put it into practical use.
Now, is he a Malinois also, or
So Murphy is a Malinois Shepherd mix.
you have two Malinois in your home now? Compared to a regular pet dog, is there any difference when they're off duty? Do you notice? Like, would you say they're more of a challenge, that breed?
They definitely can be. And for the uninitiated, I don't really recommend getting a Malinois as a pet dog. If you expect the dog just to sit on the couch,
True
it's
that.
not going to be how you expect it to work out. In fact, your couch is going to be in 1,000 pieces when you get home. It's just going to be a bad day for everybody. If you have a specific job for that dog to do, and that's what Malinois are bred to do. They're working dogs. That's
Right.
what they're designed for. So if you have a job for them to do, they'll do a job and they'll do it well. When we take that and we bring it home, there are some different challenges. You can't really leave them alone just to their own devices because they get into stuff. Because
Right.
they're high drive dogs, so they channel that drive into different things.
Yeah, they got to find something else to do, equivalent to working in their mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know a lot of people, they see them in the movies and stuff. They just had that movie with Channing Tatum, Dog. That caused like a lot of people to be curious or interested in that breed. I think it is important to note that they are hard drive working shepherds and,
Yeah. And unfortunately,
really do your research if you're...
yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, after movies like that, it was a really good movie. I enjoyed that movie.
Yeah.
But knowing the breed of Malinois, unfortunately, that's why a lot of those dogs now end up in shelters and different programs because people go out, get them as puppies, and don't realize that those dogs that were in that movie or in other movies where you see these high drive Malinois doing work, doing jobs, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of training
Right.
go into those dogs. The CBS show SEAL Team, Justin Melnick, he works with the dog Dita. That dog, 10 hours a day, he said,
Oh, wow.
constantly doing training.
10 hours?
10 hours a day doing training
Wow.
to be able to get that dog as highly trained as it was. So if you don't channel that drive into something, it'll go into something destructive.
Yeah, they're gonna figure out something for you to channel it into, and it's probably not gonna be something that you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the challenges about working with the canines on job that you found?
So our dogs are considered dual purpose or multi-purpose canines in that we train them for several different jobs. One of those jobs is narcotics detection, which they're trained to detect 5 or 6 different narcotic substances: marijuana, methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, crack. And then in some instances, like Murphy, he's trained to detect MDMA. We also train them for criminal apprehension, and that's a multifaceted skill set as well, in that they're trained for actually the biting and holding on, which people are most familiar with. And then we also train them to track. And so tracking is a very complicated process for the dogs because they're having to do so many different things. So we train them in scent-specific tracking. So they are to take a specific human odor from a source, usually use a glove or some other scent article. They take that human odor and they follow it from point A to point Z.
Okay.
And so wherever that person is gone, they are to follow that odor. And for the dog to do that, the reason it's so complicated is because there's so many different odors that are out there, other human odors that are out there, and they're having to differentiate between all of those other things that are out there and that one human odor that they're supposed to follow.
And stay on track and not get distracted by.
Absolutely. So it's very complicated for them. And then at the very end, we have the biting and holding on if the situation dictates. And that's a very, very small subset of any time that we deploy the dog. We also train the dog for evidence recovery. So if we're looking for, say, somebody ran from us, and during that track, we believe that they have thrown a gun or some other article of evidence, we'll deploy the dog out and have them search for that. And then we also train for building searches. So the dog is trained to go to the door of a building and say it's a large commercial building that has been burglarized and we believe there's people inside.
Right.
We'll give the dog a command and they'll go from door to door to door using their nose and detect fresh human odor. And when they detect that, they sit and provide an alert. So there's a bunch of different things that we train the dogs to do, and each one we have to spend an amount of training on, typically each week, to keep that up.
So a lot of maintenance in there,
Absolutely.
in their training. And that's for the life of the dog or for as long as they're working, they're just continually doing the training. And
Absolutely. I believe Vader, when I had him for the 6 years, at the end of our training, he had somewhere close to 3,000 hours of training, just training on his records.
Wow.
And that was just for the 6 years that I had him.
Yeah. I can totally see why, as a pet dog, they would have a hard time because they're used to continually putting in all that. And that's crazy, too, to think like how smart those dogs are to be able to, differentiate all those aspects like of training, too, because that's a lot.
It is.
It's a lot for a dog. It's interesting. Do you plan on staying with Canine?
Plan on staying with Canine.
How many dogs do you think you'll have by the time you're...
I don't know. So this is my second one. He'll probably stay in service until he's 9 or 10 years old, just like Vader.
Right. So he's young right now.
He is. Yeah. The canines will stay. Murphy is currently 2 years old.
Okay.
So they typically stay in service until they're about 9 or 10, depending on several different factors. If the dog is a very large dog and they're more heavy-bodied, it's harder on their joints. And so you see a shorter life of the dog as far as their working life goes. If they're a smaller dog or you have very high endurance maintenance on the dog, so you have them work out, you're keeping them tip-top shape, then the dog can stay in service a lot longer. So it's very dependent. There's a lot of variables that go into that. Our department, we're fortunate to have donors that support us. And so we've got a dog treadmill. It's called a slap mill.
That's once they operate by themselves.
So it's completely operated by the dog. There's no power that goes to it. They're not forced to run. They're just put on it, and if they want to run, they run.
I bet you they do.
Yeah, they do. They do. They have a lot of fun on it.
Yeah.
But it gets them a good workout. And so we want to keep that cardiovascular endurance on them so that when we're out there doing a track in the middle of summer, we have a chance of finding the person.
They're not getting winded or anything. Yeah.
So they're not getting exhausted.
What do you do if you're out, like maybe they're searching or tracking and they get stuck? Like is there a way to redirect them or get them back?
Absolutely. So it's one of the things that we train for. There's several different aspects of tracking that we work on each week. and whenever we have a chance to do a track. One of those is you just get to a point and the dog loses odor. And that can be for several different reasons. You get to an intersection and the dog loses odor. Well, there may have been a car come and pick that person up. We teach the dog to cast, which is taking the dog and making them do a circle. And hopefully in that cast around, they pick back up into the odor. We can bring them into the last known point that we had known odor. So if we have a footprint or something that corroborates what the dog is showing us, then we can bring that dog back in around in that same area, have the dog pick back up in the odor, and hopefully not miss what the person did the second time. There's a whole lot of variables that go into it. Weather, environmentals, your terrain, all plays into tracking.
Yeah. Wind.
Yeah, absolutely. So human odor behaves very similarly to water. And so when you're in an environment, changes in elevation, the way that the wind is blowing, your terrain, such as whether you're traveling on concrete, asphalt, gravel, grass, tall grass, it all changes the way that that human odor is behaving. And so it'll either be moving fast, it could be moving slow, it can be at the dog's nose level, it can be close to the ground, temperature plays into it. All those different things we're always
So then
thinking
the dog
about.
has to adjust to all that too. And that's crazy to think how, like, just awesome it is that they can do that. Like, their sensory system. I was just thinking, like, when you were talking about all the different things that affect the sense, and then the dogs being able to adjust to that. I mean, that's really cool.
Yep. That's
really cool.
There's a lot of stuff, a lot of math that plays into it as far as dogs in their head, they're having to make all these little calculations all the time and try and figure out where they're supposed to go. And so you're watching the dog's body language, and then we're having to be at sometimes the smart end of the leash and think, okay, so the wind's blowing from west to east. Could that odor be blowing in that direction and getting stuck up against a building or getting stuck in the bushes? So then we have to try and work that out, because by and large, when we're doing a track, we typically don't do search and rescue missions with our canines. There is a lady in town that runs a bloodhound, and she does do search and rescue stuff with her dog. But our dogs are dual purpose. So for us to do a search and rescue mission is kind of iffy because the dogs are trained to bite. So it's not ideal. It could be done, but it's just not ideal. And so
you don't want them to bite the person they're supposed to be rescuing.
For sure.
Like, I found them.
Yeah, for sure. But the people that we're looking for typically don't want to be found. And so we're looking for armed individuals, people that have committed violent offenses, felony offenses. And so these people we presume them to be armed until they're proven not to be armed. If we're not very careful in what we're doing, especially on a track, that can come back to get us pretty good. It leads to an ambush situation. Ambushes on canines and canine handlers are at, I think, an all-time high. We utilize a couple of different resources to try and mitigate that risk. And going back to donors, we were given funds for FLIR breach thermal units to go on helmets. And so we're kind of like the Predator movie. We can see in heat vision sometimes.
That's pretty cool.
And then we utilize our department's drone team. And so they'll fly up above us and monitor the situation around
if somebody's
us
coming
to try and prevent an ambush. There's a lot of stuff that plays into it.
It's crazy. It's wild. You mentioned donations and people donating to the department. If anybody wanted to do that, how could they go about that? Can anybody donate?
Absolutely. I'm not 100% on how to go about doing that. Our public information officers are Richard Espinoza and Kelsey Hernandez, and they would probably be some of the ones to reach out to.
But you had said that there's currently 4 canines and canine handlers.
Correct.
Is that a max, or is that just like the budget of what San Angelo can afford at the moment?
So that's currently the number of handlers and canines that our department allots to the canine unit. I don't know if we've ever had any more, and I don't know how many we started out with. But right now we have the 4. We have 1 sergeant and then 3 handlers. And the sergeant also runs a canine.
Are the other 3, are they also Malinois or Malinois mixes?
So we have Sergeant Fincher has patrol dog Xander, and he is a Dutch Shepherd. Canine Officer Flores has Jack, and I believe he's a Malinois Shepherd mix, but he's solid black. And then Canine Officer Bohe has a Malinois Shepherd mix, mostly Malinois, a little touch of Shepherd in there. Then I have Patrol Dog Murphy.
So these aren't purebred. That's not something that's needed for this type of job.
Yeah, so it's not needed. In fact, I personally prefer the mix. Yeah. The Malinois, if you tell the Malinois, hey, guy jumped off the cliff, go get that guy. The Malinois will jump off the cliff in an attempt to go get the guy.
Oh.
A Shepherd will go up to the cliff and go, absolutely not, and turn around. A Shepherd Malinois mix will go up to the cliff, look down, and then figure out a way to get down there.
Without killing himself.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty cool way to look at it. Yeah. So basically the GSDs, they have more of a brain, where Malinois are more like impulse.
They're very driven.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't really touch on is medical care for the dog.
Okay.
There's a couple of different vets in town that we go through. Our primary vet is Western Vet up on 2105.
Okay.
And then we have a couple of different secondary vets that we go through for, let's say we're after hours. We'll tap into those resources. Because right now, San Angelo doesn't have a 24-hour veterinary service.
Yeah. I know they had, was it Southland or Southside?
Southside.
For a little bit, they were doing that.
Yeah. And so now we're not 24 hours. So the Canine Division a couple of years ago elected to, one, get first aid kits that were built primarily for the dogs. And two, we have undergone some fairly significant advanced training for the dogs. So if something happens to the dogs in the field, primarily if we're out on a track, either a traumatic injury happens to them or a heat injury happens to them, we have the capability of caring for the dog. So we can start breathing for the dog. We can stop bleeding. We can give the dogs fluids, some advanced airway stuff with the dogs to make sure that they're able to make it to the vet.
Right.
And get the care that they need. Heat injury is a kind of a hot topic for canines.
Right. Especially here, I'd imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have vehicles fail all the time. You have dogs that are out on pursuits or out on tracks or doing their jobs. And there's little factors that you don't see, little behaviors that you don't see in the dog sometimes that are indicators of heat injury. And then all of a sudden your dog's on the ground and they can't get rid of the heat
Happens
fast enough.
quickly.
We have temperature scanning microchips from Home Again. They're called
wow.
Home Again Temp Scan, and it's just like your regular Home Again microchip that you get at the vet's office. This one, when you scan it, it gives
Tells
a
you
core
your
temperature
temperature?
for the dog.
That's pretty cool.
So it's within a degree or a half degree core
This is
temperature.
pretty accurate.
And so we can scan that, and it's a whole lot easier to scan that than try and get a other method of
Right.
temperature
Mouth
out
or
in
the
the
other end,
field.
yeah.
That's a whole lot easier for us.
Yeah, imagine.
But that's one other way that we can help monitor the dog, make sure that they're healthy out in the field, and keep them working.
It just sounds like so much training, the dogs have. And then as handlers, you all, how complicated would you say, or how challenging is that, being a handler, being on that end of the leash? And we talked a lot about the dog, but we didn't talk too much about.
It's definitely a full-time job. One part of the application process is the oral board that they talk to you about all the different aspects of canine and whether or not you're prepared to make those sacrifices and go to trainings and all those other things. And part of it is, have you talked to your family about it? Is your family prepared for you to spend hours and hours and hours training this dog? Are they prepared to have this high drive dog at the house? Do you have kids? Are those kids prepared to have this dog in the house? Because there's a lot that goes into it, and if your family's not ready for it, it can be overwhelming at times. That can be very taxing on the handlers. It can be taxing on the family, but I think it's worth it.
What does your family think?
My wife came into all of this knowing that I already had a working dog, and she's just kind of adapted and overcome for the most part. It was a little bit taxing. We had just had our second son in November of last year whenever I was going to handler school.
Oh, wow.
And so I went to handler school in February of this year, of 23. And we just had him in November of 22. And so she was still with him at the house and trying to adapt to having 2 kids at the house. Then I was just gone for 4 weeks.
Oh.
Pacesetter Canine is down in Liberty Hill.
Okay.
And we elected to have them as our vendor for Murphy. Fantastic training. Wonderful training group down there. Can't say enough good things about them. It was a lot to be gone for 4 weeks. Got to come home on the weekends, so that was helpful for her.
Yeah.
But it was a lot.
Yeah, I imagine. But she must be a pretty strong person. Young kids and,
Oh,
high
absolutely.
drive dog, and congratulations on your
Thank you.
your son. Do you think we would bring Murphy in even just for a minute?
Yeah.
He's already got some smells. He's like, somebody was eating in here. Are they trained to be neutral around people? Are they allowed to be friendly? How does that work?
Yeah, so they're trained to be neutral. He is a very good social dog. We like to have dogs that will engage when they're told to, but that can be around people and not just an uncontrollable biting machine. Murphy, Sydney.
Good boy, Murph.
Boy. So you'll see that he's wearing this vest. This is a ballistic vest that was donated to him and donated to all of our dogs.
Nice.
Hey, leave their cups alone.
There's nothing in there, bud.
These vests are specifically fitted to the dogs. They were from Canine Tactical out of Iowa. They were donated to us and provide the dogs with some ballistic protection.
That's pretty hardcore, buddy. If there's gunfire, that'll keep them safe.
Yeah, so it'll keep him safe. It's also stab and slash resistant. Hey, don't need to watch.
It's all right. Oh.
He's sometimes a little chewy. He likes to eat watches. It comes with a mount on the back.
No, I
for
see
a
that. Yeah.
camera if we have a camera for him. And then he's got an IR strobe light that's on
Yeah,
his
that's
back.
right
So
here.
if we're under in night vision goggles, we
Pretty
can still see
cool.
the dog if he's downrange.
That's
But
cool.
he does pretty good. He's a good boy. But he's still a baby. He's 2 years old. And
He's a big baby.
hey, don't climb on their chairs. He is a big baby. He likes to get into everything too. Hey,
You very curious, sir?
Sydney.
Then he's got just a regular flat collar and then a prong collar too.
Yeah. Some handlers have elected to go to e-collars occasionally. He wasn't really receptive to e-collar. We may try it later on in the future, but the prong collar he's really good on.
I don't want to keep you too long, Murph. You're doing good, so we don't want to ruin a good thing. Thank you again for taking the time out to come and bring Murphy to meet everybody and answer some questions.
Oh, big yawn.
We really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
All right.
Hope we answered all the questions you had.
I think you did.
Okay.
I think you did. Do you have anything to say, Murphy? Do you want some dog treats for Christmas? What do you like to eat? What's your treat of choice, Murphy?
He's a fan of milk bones.
Milk bones. You're a classic guy.
And I'd like to say he barks on command, but he's a very quiet dog. He doesn't hardly bark at all.